Hello, everyone. Today we'll learn about the special connection between the Jewish people and Shabbat, especially in the context of coming out of Egypt. As we mentioned at the beginning, on Friday night we talk about the creation in our prayers, and on Shabbat morning we talk about Zecher Litzat Mitzrayim, remembering coming out of Egypt. And so Rav Melamed gives us two midrashim. I think maybe after we finish all of Rashi, we should go to Bereshit because Jerry asked yesterday about where this actual midrash is. I still haven't found it, but these midrashim that Rabbi Melamed brings are fascinating and tell us more about things that we learned in kindergarten maybe, but in the context of being an adult and learning it, you understand it much better. So the rabbis have a opinion, and it's mainstream that our forefathers kept the Torah. In fact, Ramban questions this understanding because he says, "How could Jacob marry two sisters? How could Amram marry his aunt? If our ancestors kept the Torah, then these are things exactly against it." So the simplest answer is they didn't keep everything. They kept only what they thought was important for the upbringing of the Jewish people and creating the Jewish people. But the more complicated answer is that they understood through observing the world that there's certain things that are between for sure ben adam lechavero, between us and fellow human being, because that's so simple, but also things between us and God. So the parable that Maimonides gives is that the love of Hashem should be like the love of your spouse. You know what their favorite chocolate is, you know what their favorite color for clothing, for flowers, you know what music makes them happy, stuff like that. So the fathers, our forefathers and foremothers, basically figured out which things are good for their relationship with Hashem. And the very first time that somebody brought a korban, an offering, was Cain. I often say that Hevel was just a copycat, but even though Hashem didn't accept that korban, it was the first time that is mentioned that somebody brought an offering to Hashem. Just like if I really want to court my date, I bring her fresh flowers, not plastic flowers that I picked up in the cemetery, right? So I'm just giving that as a simple and funny example because recently we saw that on one of the shows. So it doesn't say here about all the forefathers. This is in Parshat Vayeshev, where he came. Sorry, Parshat Vayishlach, where he came back from Haran and stayed outside of Shechem. So another matter, and he encamped before the city, meaning outside the city. He entered on Friday near sunset while it was still day, and established Shabbat boundaries while it was still day. That is to say, Jacob observed Shabbat before it was given. So that's the first source. And the second source is specifically about the people of Israel in Egypt. Can you all see it, or did it not switch? Shmot Rabbah 5?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So Vayetzav Paro b'yom hahu. So this is after the first conversation between Moses and the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh made the work and the slavery harder. He said that he instructed them to not be given the straw anymore for making the bricks, but that they have to gather the straw and make the same amount of bricks that they did every day. So it says Melamed al Rasha. So it teaches us about this wicked one, that he did not delay harming them. This was the fourth decree. The taskmasters pressed, saying, "These are the Egyptians, the foremen, these are the elders of Israel. You shall no longer give the people the straw. You shall no longer give the people straw and the quota of the bricks, etc." From here you learn that each and every one had a quota of how many bricks they were to make daily, and I think that that's the simple meaning of the verse anyway. Therefore, initially he enslaved them with gentle persuasion so that they would make the bricks with all their might and to see the extent of their ability. On the basis of that number that they had made the first day, they decreed upon them to make every day. For they are lazy. That's what the Pharaoh told about them. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said he began clenching his teeth and saying, "You are nirpim," which is an expression of filth. May his bones be crushed. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had nothing nice to say about these evil people. Therefore they cry, saying, etc. And so this teaches us that they had scrolls in their possession in which they would delight every Shabbat that said that the Holy One, blessed be He, will deliver them from Egypt. Because they rested on Shabbat, the Pharaoh said to them, "Let heavier work be imposed upon the men, and they all labor in it." So this is the source that the Hebrews already knew that they were going to be saved, and so because Moses or somebody else asked for them to be off work on Shabbat, and that was the time that they looked in these scrolls and basically talked about the stories about their forefathers and foremothers. Just to break for a second before we go on to the actual halacha, Rabbi Uri Dasberg, um, I think I think it was his father, maybe it was him. He was a rabbi in the Yeshivat Gush, and he told us that, again, I don't know if it's him or his father, when they were in the labor camp, they said instead of having a Shabbos Goy, we're going to have a Shabbos Jew. Every person will contribute a little more to the making of the bricks or whatever else they were making, and that way one Jew will sit on the side and keep Shabbat, and he believes that that's what saved their group from ever being harmed during the Holocaust. So that's a real connection even to our generation. Um, where is Halacha? Edge? No. Oh, it's right there. So the link between the Exodus and Shabbat. So during the first 2 millennia, as we talked about yesterday, after creation, humans learned how to sustain themselves, to find food, clothing, and shelter, and to organize a society that could cope successfully with the challenges of their surroundings. Yet apart from a select few who clung to monotheistic faith and morality, the entire world operated based on need and brute strength, without any idealistic or spiritual goals. This situation continued until the patriarchs Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov appeared on the scene, called God's name, and dedicated their lives to improving the world through truth and kindness. They rejected paganism, which sanctified forces of nature and denied morality. Based on their intuition, the patriarchs kept mitzvot and observed Shabbat. Notice they didn't say kept all the mitzvot because the controversy that I mentioned at the beginning. And never, because they still did not receive the Torah, they could not sustain their ideals within the world. On the contrary, the very wickedness they fought rose up against them. Egypt, then the most powerful of all nations, subjugated and enslaved the Israelites, forcing them to do backbreaking labor in order to sustain the Egyptian economy and provide the Egyptians with all their wants and needs. This showed the Israelites how wicked human nature could be and how badly the world needs the faith heralded by their ancestors. So, like we said before, he brings us midrash about that tradition, and he says the Israelites were not redeemed from merely Egyptian slavery when, after the Exodus, they accepted the Torah and Shabbat. They were also freed from their enslavement to nature and the struggle for survival. So, when Shabbat was first introduced to them officially in the desert, it was in the context of manna, that they don't have to go and search for the manna on Shabbat because it's not going to be there. It will be double on Friday, and they gather double, and that's why we have the 2 meals or the 3 meals. And so they were freed from the view that man's sole purpose is to accumulate as much money and wealth as possible, even if it means controlling and enslaving others to that end, because that was how the world was so corrupt. Jews observe Shabbat and thus always remember that God created and sustains the world. Man's purpose is to cleave to God and his attributes and to free himself from the bonds of slavery to the evil inclination and the struggle for survival. So even though we are now avadim, servants of Hashem, we still have a free choice if we want to do something or not. We don't have somebody standing over our head telling us, if you don't do this, you'll be severely punished. So even if due to the exigencies of circumstances and lack of choice, one must work hard to support themselves. Even if one has been sold into slavery, he still rests on Shabbat. By doing so, he demonstrates that he is not entirely enslaved. His spirit remains free and connected to its divine roots. And we'll stop here.